you are a
Yes,
true New Yorker. You are a
I
boy
am.
from Queens,
I am.
and you really are one of my favorite people to follow on Instagram. And I thought it was hilarious. The other day, you were walking on the streets of New York City, and you say to your followers, "Listen, I'm doing appearances." Jersey, wherever you were doing. I'm like, Jersey and New York.
I'm doing, yeah, Manhattan and Brooklyn.
You're like, you better come to these. You go, I am never doing this again. I am
And I
never writing
wasn't
another
lying.
book.
No, it was a reaction to it's a lot. Like I'm going at like I when I do something, I like give 150%. So like I'm really because people are sometimes, because of my persona is a little bit like antisocial. But when I am social, I do it. I don't do things halfway. So like I'm doing this, I'm going, I want to see people. I want to like if you're somebody that feels like, oh, I kind of would like to come, we kind of seem simpatico because I feel like sometimes people feel like, we get each other in this kind of weird Instagram community. So that's why I'm like, come, please. I would like to meet you if you would like to come and say hi. And if you want to get my book, I want to say thank you. And we can meet and kind of and do this. And I'm here and I'm going to do everything, but then probably not ever again. like then I'll be tired. Then I'll be done. It's not like, yeah, it'll take everything and then I'll be like, I don't want to, it's a lot to write a book, Jess, like just to write the book.
Before we get into everything, this is just like kind of a stray thought because trust me, I want to
Okay.
get into your
I
meet.
love stray thoughts.
This is a stray thought because I do want to get into your meet cute with Brad, and because I love the story of how you met. But I remember maybe it was a year ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, like what is time? But I remember you and Brad were filming like a travel show
Right.
for HBO Max. What did you ever finish? You had shot like two
Yeah,
destinations.
yeah, yeah, we did. We went to Rio and Buenos Aires and we had a lot of fun. But COVID happened. We were about to leave for Australia, literally the same day. I think we found out Tom Hanks had it or something in Australia. So obviously we didn't go. And as a result, yeah, the show died of COVID, basically.
I mean,
It was a
but
yeah.
can't we pick that back? But can't we pick that back up?
It was years ago now, and it was kind of like so maybe in some other iteration at some other point, sure, we'd love to. But as far as that, what we were doing, yeah, it didn't survive COVID.
And what was the concept of the show? Like Brad and Gary take on, like, was this like a Kim and
Yeah,
Chloe
like
take
we
on
just
New
kind of
York?
like travel with us. It was just kind of like travel with us. We went to restaurants. I tasted food. I kind of like checked out, my hotel room. I picked apart things. Kind of like come with us, on a trip. And I think we travel, especially me, the way that most people kind of secretly like to travel. I think oftentimes you feel like there's all these things you should do, but in reality, sometimes you just want to go to a movie and sit in Starbucks or like watch TV. There are things you can't like. I always feel like do what you want to do when you travel. You don't have to see every site. It becomes kind of
So what is
a lot.
so what is the way you're saying, like some people would actually secretly prefer the way you guys travel? Like, so
Yeah.
what is that? What
Sometimes it's more in Paris. We went to go see James Bond recently instead of going to the Musée d'Orsay. I'm like, I've been to the Musée d'Orsay, but I haven't seen the new James Bond. And in Paris, to go to the movies, that nobody talks in the movie theaters in Paris. It's just a thing. They're super, super quiet. It's like you could hear a pin drop. Nobody. It's like culturally, they don't make a peep at anything. So it's fun to go to the movie. I know that, so I'm like, let's go to the movies in Paris. It'll be quiet. Yeah, and the theaters are beautiful. So yeah, it's like a good movie city. But I think a lot of people would like to do that, but they feel like, well, I could do that at home, so I'm not going to do that. But that's like it's fun to do it when and then you're actually with the people who live in the city or in the movie theater. It's not filled with tourists. You kind of feel like you're doing what the people who live there do in some weird way too. It makes you feel like you kind of live there.
That is hilarious. Well, okay, so when you come to New York, for example, what's your favorite thing to do? Just sit in, I mean, you sit in Starbucks, or Starbucks is like famously one of your bits in LA, but like what's like a New York thing? Because now you're sort of a traveler because you guys live in LA.
Yeah.
What is an unknown gem of New York? It's certainly that people do not speak at the
Oh, an
movies.
unknown. I don't know if it's an unknown gem, but I love Raoul's. in
Oh yeah.
Soho. It's been around forever. I remember when I was working as a bellman in New York, and I had a friend who was a waitress there. It was the first time I went, and it was, to me, it was like so sophisticated, like Raoul's on Prince Street, a French, beautiful French little bistro. It feels very neighborhoody. And I was like, one day, I mean, like I couldn't afford to, go there, but I went and had like the staff meal, and I got to do it. And it was like so lovely. It just made, I was like, I would like to be able to come here. And I've been going to Raoul's for, 30 years, what I mean? And it's still there and it's just fabulous. The food's always good. It's not filled with tourists. It's filled with New Yorkers and stuff. And it's like a fabulous New York place that's been around
You
forever.
know, you know that there's a windy staircase.
Yeah, 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 to the bathroom.
Not only the bathroom, there's a psychic who will
Oh
do
yeah, I know.
readings.
Yeah, uh-huh. They do readings up there. I know.
I've had my, I don't know what I had read. Maybe it was tarot cards. Um, yeah, I did do that once. Unclear how legit that psychic is, but if you want to eat dinner and get your cards read, that there's a little twofer.
Yeah, I always love when you can kind of like kill two birds with one stone.
Love it.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
efficient.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Now, I guess let's get, since we're talking about travel, I would love to hear like the extended version of how you and Brad met. Like from what I understand, you both by happenstance happened to be in Mykonos, and at this time you were far more established in your career. Brad was only like 23, and he was
Very
like
good.
staying at like a was he not like staying at a hostel and you were at like a nice hotel? Somehow you crossed paths. Tell me, fill in the blanks here.
Yeah, I was in Mykonos on vacation with a friend, and I was having dinner at Nikos Taverna, which is just like a very popular taverna and a very busy outdoor part of Mykonos, and thousands of people are going by. It's a very big outdoor space. And I saw Brad going by with another man, and I saw him and I said, "Who's that? I want to meet him." I was drawn to him instantly. My eye went right to him. And then my friend said, "I was talking earlier today with the person he's walking with. Isn't that weird?" They walked right by our table. We were right along the path. They stopped, and my friend said hello to his friend. And Brad and I started talking, and we haven't been apart since, basically.
Well, okay.
Literally. We
But so
started talking, we got along. He came out with us that night. We went out dancing, we stayed out, da da da. The next day, I was like, "Where are you staying?" And then he told me like some shit box. And I was like, "Oh God, I'm at the Belvedere." It's like, fabulous. And I was like, "Why don't you just stay here with me? We'll have a fun couple of days." And then I was going to Santorini with my friend Sal. And then I'm like, "We're going to Santorini. Do you want to come with us to Santorini?" And he was like, "Sure." So we came to Santorini with us. And then I had to go back to LA. And then I was back for a few days and I was like, "Hey, do you want to come for a visit in LA?" And he was like, "Okay." And then he came to visit me like 5 days after we left Mykonos. And then I was like, let's just, let's not label this. Let's just see how this goes. I know this is very strange and fast and all. And let's take it day by day. No promises for the future, no expectations. Let's just, if we both agree with this, we can have fun and we don't have to put any pressure on it. So now, almost 21 years later, I'm like, let's just take this day by day.
You are legally
we don't have to
married.
label this. We don't have to put any pressure. So I'm like, "Yeah, you're still here." Like, it's still, I guess yeah.
You're married, but you're still taking it day by day,
I
which is
know,
something
but
that
we're
I
still,
actually do recommend.
we're still like no promises for the future, but let's just see how this goes. Sure.
You turned a Mykonos hookup into a 20-year relationship.
Yeah, and I turned Brad into, Brad. I'm basically Dr. Frankenstein and he's my monster. He came, I was like, "Let's get rid of these clothes. You don't need this." Like this stuff. No, that's very, yeah, no, how about this? I was like giving him my clothes. And yes, and now he's a fashionista.
And
Yeah.
so at the time, you obviously like were a professional writer,
Yes.
and through Brad, I mean, I think it really must be through Brad that you became more of a public figure because he gets cast on the Rachel Zoe project, winds up getting his own spinoff, and then you are, as I said before, like you are seen on the show as quote Brad's boyfriend. Back then, at that time, what was your feeling on like? I assume you were a fan of reality TV, but like, how did you feel about sort of like losing your anonymity in a way?
Yeah, I didn't when Brad was on the Rachel Zoe project, I thought he should do it. I thought it would be good for him, a good experience for him. I never expected it to, I remember he showed me the first episode of it like a week before it aired, or even a few days before it aired, and he got it. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know who's going to watch this because it seems so,
Mhm.
specific and odd. But I was like, but you're terrific. And then, but I had told him when he did that, and I encouraged him to do it. I was like, just so you know, I'll never appear on it. Cameras can never come to our house, and I don't want to ever be mentioned by name on the show. This is yours, but I'll never be a part of it. And as long as that's fine. I'm like, then I think this is your experience. So I was never mentioned on the show. I never had any. So I watched the show as people did. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So when he had an opportunity to do his own show, it was I kind of, obviously I had to be a part of it because he couldn't do a show about his life if I'm then it's suddenly, it also started to seem like people were wondering who his boyfriend was, because at that point we were together 10 years, and it started to feel like it was a bigger deal to keep it a secret than to just be like, oh fuck it, I don't care. So I did it.
Did you really become close with Lisa Rinna, like just born out of like an Instagram comment?
Yeah, kind of. Except Lisa and I had met before. Brad knows Lisa, and they had met socially, and I think maybe they even worked together once or something. So I had met Lisa before Instagram too. We had met several times, but we weren't like friends.
What are you most looking forward to with this new season of Beverly Hills?
Oh, did you see the trailer?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, all of it. It looks so good. Yeah, it looks so good. I like when the casts are big too. Like it's a night.
Oh
I like when
yeah.
people return, and I like when they bring a new person in. I think there's like 7 women on the
Yeah.
show. I like a big cast. For me, when it's like just 5 of them, it's too few. Like I get claustrophobic. I like when there's like 7 or 8 people. It kind of I like more, stories, more people kind of weaving around. And Beverly Hills feels like it has a nice, rich cast.
I'm excited for the day. I mean, I think it's inevitable. Rinna will eventually, if for story purposes only, will eventually turn on Erica Jane. And that would be wild. TBD if that's happening this season, but
Yeah, I don't know either.
yeah, or
Yeah,
in 10
I
years.
don't know.
But I
I
think
don't know. Well, but that's also the nice thing about reality. And I don't like it when people go when they don't talk to each other at all, and then it's like you can't continue the show. Like with Lisa Vanderpump, it was like, well, no, they weren't talking to each other, so you can't. There's no coming when there's no coming back from it. It's kind of stops being fun. I like when you can always kind of come back and start again the next season, because that's just more interesting to me. I like when people kind of can get past something and then start talking. But when the shows get where it's like, I will never talk to this person again, it's like, oh, well, then what are we going to do? What are we going to watch,
yeah. What are we doing here? What are we doing here without Dorinda?
Exactly.
What came first, Will and Grace or Family Guy?
Family Guy.
Oh, Family Guy came first.
Yeah. I've been
Okay.
on Family Guy since the first episode, actually. I remember I got a VHS tape of the first, like, I think it's like 7 minutes. It was like a presentation, and it was based on a student film that Seth did. And it was, would I be interested in, meeting on this show? And at the time I was like, oh, I wanted to go on, a show that was already established, and I was like, but then I watched this tape. And the first thing that I saw in it was, Stewie, I remember, had a tuna fish sandwich, and he shoots a blow dart out of it. And they all look at him, and he's like, what did you staring at? It's tuna fish and nothing else. It was just this very kind of basic Stewie kind of beginning line, but I was drawn to it. I thought, I was like, oh, I love that. I love that character. It wasn't successful the first couple of years. It wasn't until it was canceled, actually. So I worked on it for, I think, 2 or 3 seasons, and then it was finally canceled after 3 seasons. It was canceled twice at the beginning. And then when it was canceled, I started working on Will and Grace. And while I was on Will and Grace, this Family Guy came back, and then after Will and Grace ended, eventually I went back to Family Guy. So because it's been on for so long now.
Which experience did you enjoy more, Will and Grace or Family Guy?
They're really different experiences, because I love what was great about Will and Grace. It's also a live action show with a multicam show. It's like doing theater. It's like doing a play
Yeah.
each week. also as a gay man, to be on a show where the gay, characters are the leads, it wasn't something, I always kind of had to bend myself to fit into, like, how am I going to take my thing and turn it into that thing? I'll do it like this. And then to be on a show where you don't have to do that, it's really, it's liberating. I remember thinking like, this must be what it's like for straight people to feel every day, because I was like, a gay man of a certain age, writing about a gay man of a certain age. And I was like, I don't have to bend anything. Like, it just feels like it's nice to have that feeling. A Family Guy, I think I have a longer relationship with. And I think there's a twistedness to that show that very much speaks, to me. And I love writing for Brian and Stewie. So I thought, in different ways, but Family Guy will always have a very special place, for me.
Before we go super deep on Will and Grace, I just have
I thought I just talked about it.
No, we're going deeper. No, sit down, deeper. Get coffee. We're going deeper.
I am sitting.
We're going deeper. Tell me very quickly the decision not to have Stewie identify his sexuality. Like, he was always sort of in this state of confusion. I mean, he's a baby, but has like these evil plots. And
so you don't have this pre and post. So it's not about, he's not coming out. I mean, I think it's clear at some point late. I mean, it's clear enough that at some point later in his life, he will be gay. There's something fun about always keeping, him in this kind of like place. It also makes him, it's more real. It makes him more vulnerable, but he's struggling, and then to keep him in that is a richer kind of area. Also, I wrote an episode with Ian McKellen played a child psychologist, and Stewie does a therapy session once. And I thought, oh, that would be one way to explore it. Like, does he talk about this? But it just felt so like uninteresting to me, so it kind of got dismissed in the beginning. It was kind of like, and this isn't going to be one of your coming out sessions, so don't worry about that. That's not what I'm here for. It felt like there was a more interesting thing to talk about. Like, he's lonely because he's smart and he's different, and that separates him.
Have a chapter called TripAdvisor. What do you think the psychology is of somebody who leaves a review, whether it be on Yelp, on TripAdvisor, anybody who leaves a review? Are they inherently out of their mind?
I don't think so. I mean, I didn't think of it also that way. I mean, I read them. I don't leave them, but I read them. There is a chapter that's TripAdvisor review, and it's my kind of idea of a ridiculous TripAdvisor review, one that is the minutia of it is so ridiculous, and it actually gets into the person who's leaving the reviews kind of inner life, as opposed to the real, kind of a thing that somebody would write. It's a kind of ridiculous version of that. But I read them whenever I go. I mean, I have an exhaustive I don't just book a hotel somewhere, book a hotel room. There is like a 20-prong process, it's like, I know exactly what room I want. I'm very kind of crazy about that. So part of that exhaustive process is, yes, I'll read TripAdvisor reviews. I will also always look for the 1 star. If it's 5 stars, I don't need to read it. I'm like, like, where are the bad ones? What's the bad thing about it? Is that the thing that's going to bother me? Like, the walls are like, paper thin. We heard everything. And I'm like, that's a real trigger for me, like thin walls.
Yeah.
So I need to watch that. But I think the kind of people that leave reviews, I mean, I feel like, it's human nature. I think most people want to be seen, like you want to be kind of in a way seen. Well, you have a podcast, so you want to be seen. I think somebody could say, well, that's crazy. Why on earth would you want to have a podcast? Why is that any different than leaving a review? You're putting yourself out there saying, here I am. I have something to say. It's important. Listen to me. How is that any different than if I say I stayed at this hotel and I think it stunk, or I think it was fabulous? I don't think that's any crazier. I think not everybody, I think that's a smaller version. It's almost what comments have become. Hey, I'm here too. Hello, this is what I think about this, So it's now everybody has a version. And I think it's also a version of people wanting to be seen on some level, even if it's on a very, as small a level as that.
Such a good point. I love that.
Thank
you have there's another.
Just thought of it too.
I love how in your book you talk about gay restaurants. And this is still a thing, but I think you're referring to maybe a restaurant that doesn't quite exist anymore.
It's not really a thing anymore, Jess. Like, you're a lot younger than I am. It was in the 90s. There were very few. Literally, the only people who went to the restaurants were gay people. There are very few restaurants
What
that
were the specific restaurants?
Well, in Chelsea, there were a lot. In the book I mentioned, the one I talk about most is 18th and 8th, and it was on the corner, obviously, of 18th and 8th. That's easy. Food Bar was another one that was super popular. Manatus, which was an all-night diner, a gay diner. Then there was a place, but a lot of these just opened in the 90s. It's not like they were long existing and gay people used to go. They were like, people were like, I'm a gay man, I'm opening a gay restaurant. It was typically mostly men. There was one that everybody went to for brunch. I forget it. It was like Mary Ann's or something like that in the Village. Like, there were a lot of them. And whenever you went out for dinner, you would go out on like a Friday night, or you'd go out to one of the gay restaurants because you wanted to feel comfortable. It was very gay coffee bars. This is pre-Starbucks. There was a lot of gay bookstores. There were a lot of gay-owned businesses. And I think as time goes by, right, you get clubs, even everything becomes more integrated. It's very difficult in the restaurant business to begin with, for a restaurant to be successful, right? Especially for it to be a long-running restaurant like a Balthazar or something. So eventually, what happens is the gay people stop going to the restaurant because they want better food, or they want to go to the hip new place, or it's not necessary to go to a gay restaurant anymore because I can hold my boyfriend's hand at Gramercy Tavern and nobody cares, or at, McDonald's.
Yeah, you say you didn't go for the food, you went for the gay, and you actually people didn't realize that food could be good.
We
even
didn't
for
know food was supposed to taste good. Yeah, the idea of a foodie, didn't really exist.
So the reason why I said that they still exist, I live in Manhattan. I totally view Elmo and Cafeteria on 7th. To me, those are gay restaurants.
Yeah, but they're not 100% gay. I've been to a Cafeteria, and there's a lot of gay people in because you're in Chelsea, but you'll still see a lot of straight couples. There'll be a mix. I'm talking about like 100% all the time. And those are, yes, but those would but there were lots. And you'd get that HX magazine and it would tell you, look, there was a New York Times article not that long ago, I think, that was like the death of the gay restaurant. And it came out after I'd even written the essay, which was kind of weird. And it was like how it used to be this thing culturally, and they went through cities, Chicago, New York, Boston, LA, and about all of these places that used to be that kind of don't exist anymore.
I loved your description of the sex lines, like that. Before there was Grindr and all of that, there were these lines where you'd basically like beep from caller to caller. Now, I was first introduced to, I didn't, like, this is before my time, but I first read about this. Isaac Mizrahi wrote about this in his book.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I talked to him about it. I interviewed him and we talked about it. And I brought up to him, I was like, by the way, a fun fact about those gay sex lines. I was like, do you know that is how Andy Cohen initially met John Benjamin Hickey?
I didn't know that. No. Yes. And John Benjamin Hickey is a very close friend. Yeah.
Bring it up.
I'm going to bring it up. I'm actually seeing him soon. I will get clarification, verification, etc. on this. Yeah. I love that.
Isn't that amazing? And I love how you met it's too graphic, but like you talk about kind of like a circle jerk and like, but it was a guy that was supposed to go in
a sweet way. Yeah, I had, I write, there's this chapter, there's an essay called Jay's, and there was a club bar called Jay's Hangout in the Meatpacking District before the Meatpacking District was what it is today, obviously. And it was seedy, but not like terrible. It wasn't like, and I walked by it all the time, and I knew it was kind of like a place like, like people went in and they were kind of like, they put like a circle jerk in the back. And I was like, I'd heard of that. I knew what it was, obviously, but the idea of participating in one was so ridiculous. But I definitely, I like one night I got up the courage and I was like, I'm gonna, go check it out and see what it is. Everything was like research for a book I was writing, which obviously, I wasn't writing, but it was my way of letting myself do anything that I normally wouldn't do. I would just say, if this is research for, as a writer that I'm doing. But at the same time, at the gym that I went to, Better Bodies, which we called Bitter Beauties, there was a guy there that I had a major crush on. He didn't even know I existed, but I had a full life in my head that we lived together. And the night that I finally get it, no pun intended, get it up to go into that bar, he's there and we kind of meet for the first time. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm treating it like a meet cute, meanwhile, we're like in the worst place to meet somebody. And I'm thinking, this is my Prince Charming. Like, I had such a ridiculous romantic idea. I mean, clearly I wasn't the circle jerk bar kind of person, even though I wanted to be, but I wasn't. And then once I saw this guy in there, I was like, well, now what do I do? We have to go out on dates and I have to be wooed, and all of this shit. Like, I can't stay in here any longer. It kind of was this, I guess it's, always comes down to wanting to make a connection and struggling to figure out how to do that, but knowing that you're trying and it's kind of still not working. Maybe you're going about it wrong.
Did you ever wind up going out in like a proper way with him, with that gym guy?
Yes, we went on a date. Wasn't good.
Oh.
Yeah, no. Yeah. It wasn't. Yeah, it just didn't. I know. We did. Wow. We did end up going out on a date. Yeah.
Perhaps my favorite story that you write about your time working at the Paramount Hotel. Like you finally like move to Manhattan and you have these like dreams of being like in show business, but you're not really quite sure what. Like maybe you always dreamed of being a writer, but you're working as a bellman at the Paramount Hotel thinking this is where you'll be discovered. Like someone's going to take a look at you and be like, oh, like, do you have a manuscript that I could look at? Or
correct.
Do you want a small role on Days of Our Lives? Like, what were your dreams? Like, what was your actual fantasy?
I don't know. In the 90s, Ian Schrager, who created Studio 54 with Steve Rubell, he went to prison for tax evasion. When he came out, he switched it up. So hotels were going to be the new clubs, So the hotels in the 90s, there was this hotel scene. There were 3 hotels, the Mondrian, the Royalton, and the Paramount, and that he owned. And it was like, they were like the place in Manhattan, like the place to go. Like, I can't stress it enough. In the lobby of the hotel, it felt like glamour, 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 And I got a job at the Paramount Hotel. First, I worked at the front desk. Then I became a bellman, and it was like the place where people, went, and the lobby was teeming with people. It's in the theater district on 46th Street, and I thought I got a job there, and it was all young, attractive people. I mean, it was like crazy. It was like, yeah, they literally hired like they get fired the way they hired people. It was like so ridiculous, but I was like, if I get this job here, I'm going to be surrounded by, people in the industry, influential people in the industry. And this is going to be how I will get discovered. Like, I thought I was like Lana Turner in the drugstore, which is, famously where she got discovered. You know that if you're like 100. But, it's just this kind of like ridiculous thinking. I guess it's this sense of, but I didn't know any better. I thought somebody will come up to me and tell me like, hey, you look like you've got it in you. I can tell from the way you're standing behind that desk that you should be a contract player on All My Children. Here's my card. You had a card then. There was no cell phone. Like, call me. And I was like waiting. I was like, just put yourself in front of the right people and they'll do the rest. It's like, it doesn't, you have no idea what it is they might want you to do. Maybe it'll be to write a book. I don't know, but they'll ask you and you'll be game, you'll be ready. And it was just this crazy way of thinking. Like I literally thought somebody will kind of help me figure out what it is. Not only that, they'll pull it out of me and they'll offer me the job of my dreams, And I think I worked there for like 2.5 years and I had an epiphany one day and it was like, like, oh my God, I'm 28. And I was like, you've been living your life completely wrong. Like, you've done this completely wrong. You're waiting for something to happen to you, and you have to make the thing happen yourself. You think somebody's going to be more interested in your welfare and your career than you are? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, nobody cares about me. Nobody's looking at me. Nobody cares about me.
People only care about themselves.
Of course, nobody's, as I did. But I had created this whole fantasy of how something was going to work because I didn't know, any better. Like, I kind of had half of it right. Like, I got myself around people that were doing things that I wanted to do. That's a part of it. But yeah, I didn't know, and I didn't know. I was very ridiculously, naive about stuff. I just expected, somebody else to tell me and to come and to basically discover me. So when I had that, epiphany one day, and I talk about it in the book, what the thing that kind of makes me the moment where I kind of have to look at myself and really have a moment where I really look and see that, and I'm honest to myself, and I'm like, this is all wrong. And you've got to take a risk, and you've got to go. And I moved to LA shortly thereafter. I quit my job. I moved to LA. I learned how to write sitcom scripts, and I started writing them. And I started, I also said I was a writer, but I never wrote. I hadn't written for years since I left school. I hadn't done anything. There's a way in New York, you feel like you're a part of everything. I think I say it in the book. I was a part of everything and nothing. I had access to, because of working at the hotel, I would get free meals sometimes at restaurants that they wanted us to recommend. During previews, I would get free tickets to Broadway shows. After work, we would get into certain clubs. At the time it was the Roxy, I could get in without having. So I felt like, oh my God, my life, I had a lot of friends, and so it was this tough. So I felt like I was kind of a part of something, but in reality, and obviously, I think of that time super fondly, and I had a lot of fun, but also at the same time, I was kind of part of nothing. I wasn't doing anything that was in any way connected to what I wanted to actually do, and I didn't know even any way to make that happen. It was like a foreign land, the idea of how I would cross over. But I moved to LA, and once I started writing, and I was laser focused, and within a year I was working. I had my first TV job and my first episode on television. That's how focused I that's how quickly I was like, it was all these years of floundering, and then I just was like, no more.
I love how strict you were with yourself. Like, there's this line that like really stood out to me. Something that you said to yourself was, I will not come back to New York until I'm a writer.
I did say that, and I didn't. It's the longest in my life still that I have not been in New York City. I left in October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. Maybe COVID, maybe, but I don't even think so. 8 months. I was gone for 8 months, and I got the job.
I've always thought that the writing staff on Will and Grace might have been the strongest sitcom writing staff of that era. Like Joni Marchenko, Laura Kite. Yes.
Laura
Keitlander.
John and Tracy.
I know you wrote the episode where they flash back to Will and Jack, sort of like as like baby gays in the 80s.
Yeah, there were 2 episodes of that, though. The first one, the one you might be referring to, it might not be the one I wrote. Because the one that was more, popular. So I might not have written. I don't want to take credit for anything that I did not do.
I know how writers' rooms work, and like showrunners, and like sort of the top-down control. That really it's the showrunner that has ultimate control. You guys are all assigned episodes to write. But I'm curious, were there any moments or storylines that really came from you?
There were 2 that I think of that come to mind when you say that from my life. One was silly, kind of. I always loved Blythe Danner as Will's mother. I just thought she was fun. I liked him with her too. And Grace goes over to her house, to Will's mom's house, and she breaks a figurine that was in there, and she's freaked out, and Will is freaked out because it was like her favorite Yadro figurine that she collected. And that's something that happened. I broke in my house. My sister and I kind of broke my mother's favorite RHOBH figurine, and we went like into a tailspin. And so that kind of, and they were so funny with that. And it was just a really kind of silly, kind of a fun thing, but that, you know, sometimes something that really happened to you kind of translates into something. And then there was another episode where Will, after his father dies, it was in the last season of the show, I thought Eric and Blythe were so wonderful. There's a scene in her laundry room, and it was kind of based a little bit on my feeling of he feels like his mother has never really asked him enough about his life. Mm-hmm. And then she kind of responds, because you never tell us anything, because you keep everything so kind of close. And they have this kind of conversation, and it felt very kind of real, and it was nice. It was this sense of, you know, wanting like people to really, you know you. And sometimes you don't allow people to know you. And it works both ways. And it felt real to also their relationship, because she was, you know, kind of a little bit more reserved, his mother, and the way that we played her. And it really allowed them this kind of moment to break through. I always loved on the show, because the show never had any problem being like super, super funny. I liked the moments of real humanity between them when the characters kind of, when you really kind of had that. I always really loved those moments.
What was the writing process like at Will and Grace? Like, was it like typical like Sex and the City, where like you break it? Like, did you break the season and then just every writer was assigned an episode the way?
Well, you get assigned episodes, but you don't necessarily break the whole season at once. I think that show was, you know, more kind of soap opera like, and it's a single camera show, so a multicam is more joke heavy too. Especially that show was very joke heavy. So we would break the stories. We typically would write in 2 different rooms, you know, like there were maybe 10 writers on the show, 5 and 5. We would sit and write in 2 different rooms, and we'd punch up the scripts kind of that way. And then on show nights, which was very unique to Will and Grace, I don't know any show that did it to that extent, between takes, we would do 1 take with the script as written. And then any joke that didn't quite land or that we felt we could beat, then we would all kind of gather in a huddle, and it kind of became fun and competitive, and everybody would try to beat the jokes that we earmarked as we could possibly beat. And we would spend this, and we would do it in, you know, it's time constraint of like 10 minutes. And then the ones that won, you know, the best pitches, then somebody would go in and give them to the actors, you know, like, this is the new line. And they were extraordinary. I mean, we did it like that for 8 years. And they were also like, you can't imagine how all of them were so brilliant at taking, you know, going into the scene, taking, and the lines weren't always short, and a whole new thing, and going, and then doing another pass through it with all these new jokes in it. And it kept the show, it kept a kind of, like, it's kept it fizzy. I felt like Totally. It kept the show fizzy. It was something I like. I've done it. I did a show that I created with Ian McKellen and Derek Jacobi called Vicious. And I did that, you know, that's something that, you know, between takes, you know, like I would, not to the extent that we did it on Will and Grace, because there was, you know, a whole staff of people, but that was a very special part of the show. And oftentimes the new jokes often stayed in the script. And so what the audiences are seeing is something, a joke that might've been written literally 5 minutes before it was said. And that makes it feel very alive sometimes, you know, I think. And I feel like for a successful multicam show, it needs to have that kind of life in it to make it be a thing that feels really special.
Yeah, the show definitely has an air of like spontaneity to it.
Yeah,
I mean, which is definitely the combination of the writing and also the acting. Like, they were so perfectly cast to perform in that way.
Well, they're brilliant. You always want to work with, you know, actors that are better than the writing. You know, you want actors that elevate. You know, I'm always happy to. I'm like, you know, great actors will always kind of lift it. You know, lift it up to another place.
Were you on set when they would have like the wild like guest stars like Cher, Madonna,
sure.
Britney?
I wasn't there for Cher. I was there for Madonna. I was there for Britney. Cher is the only one I wasn't there for.
Can we talk about the Madonna and Britney appearances? Like,
Britney was wonderful. She was lovely and very funny, and I really liked her. And I really remember feeling badly. It was at a time where people were, in the press were very fixated on her in a not a great way. And I was like, why? Like she was so sweet and so funny and natural on the show. Everybody loved her. Yeah, she was great.
one of SNL's best hosts, like
Oh
back
yeah,
in
I
2000.
didn't even know that. No, but
Yeah.
yeah, she was just naturally terrific too.
And
Easy.
tell me about Madonna.
What do you want to know?
Like, how was she? Like, could she remember her lines?
Yeah. She was game. Yeah, she was funny. It was funny. It was funny. I remember, I will say this, she was funny. And we wrote a thing. Karen gets a job. I think she decides to get a job for whatever reason. She gets a job in an office, and she meets somebody in the office, and they become like best girlfriends. And the idea was that this character Madonna plays was supposed to be one of the women at the time. I don't know if people even still do it. You wear sneakers to the office, you carry your shoes in your bag, you bring your salad in your Tupperware for lunch. You go out with the girls on Thursday nights for margaritas. You wear an Ann Taylor too shirt. Is it Anne Klein too or whatever? I'm in the city. She lives outside of the city. That kind of woman, a real. That was the idea of it. And Madonna as that person would be super funny, but I don't think she wanted to dress the way that person would. So as a result, she had like really long blonde hair extensions and kind of fabulous kind of outfits and stuff. So I was like, oh, this is like 50% less funny now. I was like, too bad. It could have been really funny, but she's not going to do that. She's Madonna, so she needs to, look how she feels comfortable looking, which I get totally, whatever. But I was like, not as funny.
I know you are a huge Cher fan. Where does Madonna rank in your hierarchy?
I grew up with Madonna, and I think what she did with the Truth or Dare is still the best, documentary. It's so brilliant. And the way, Madonna was a real ally to the gay community when a lot of people weren't. And I think I remember those people. I remember Madonna. I remember Elizabeth Taylor. I remember Princess Diana. These were people with courage, when it's hard to remember, but in the 80s, when it was unfashionable, it was unfashionable, and it remains unfashionable. It was unfashionable to be somebody that was such a staunch supporter of the community and people, who were dying of AIDS. And these were their friends, obviously, also, and to kind of be a voice in support of them and to use their platform for that. So I will always, love her for that.
The final thought I have about like TV writing, and I guess Will and Grace, it would be like a specific example of this, reboots. Like, I'm thinking like, and just like that, Will and Grace, the L Word. In plain language, why are reboots never good?
I don't know. I have to say, I'm not a nostalgic person. Like, I'm not, it's not my, I like things to finish, that's just personally, I like when something, ends and it has an ending, and I like that, I think things have a natural end. I just think people, especially now, I think there's a certain thing where people like the comfort of characters that they love and they miss. It's like, it's a nice kind of a thing, that people want to spend more time with these people, So I think nostalgia, it comes in waves too. I think we didn't call them reboots, but there were times where they would revisit Little House on the Prairie, or whatever, so I think there were versions of it all throughout time. You want to check in on people, I guess, that you realize, that you cared for these characters and you miss.